Alright, so in this video we're going to play with some of the new video capabilities in the new Photoshop CS3 Extended. And what we're going to do is, what I've discovered is that you can now treat a QuickTime movie as if it were a regular layer inside of Photoshop. You can apply distortions, mask it, do all kinds of cool things with it. So what I'm going to do is, on my desktop here I've got a couple of QuickTime movies. First I have here a quick abstract background. You can see it's just an animation of just a lighted background. It's very short. And I also have a clip from Photoshop TV. Of course, there's me and Mr. Felix Nelson. And we're going to use these clips to composite a design entirely inside Photoshop, all retaining all the video aspects that you just saw. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and open up these QuickTime movies inside Photoshop. So I'm just going to select them both and drag them over my Photoshop icon here. And it will open them up. Now, as you can see, they look like regular Photoshop documents. They have the appearance and everything, but if you look here in the Layers palette, we have a little icon, little film strip icon that indicates that this is, in fact, a movie file. And if I go under my Window menu here and go to Animation, drag this into view here, you can see if I take my playhead here and drag it, we see that we're getting the full motion video that we saw in the QuickTime player, all right inside Photoshop here. So we're going to composite these into a really interesting design. Now, before I do anything to any video files, before you can distort or apply any type of effects to a video file inside Photoshop CS3 Extended, you must change it into a smart object. So I'll do that simply by going into the Layers palette, holding down my Control key or right-click directly on that layer, and we'll get this menu here, and we'll go down here and select Convert to Smart Object. We will do the same thing to this file as well, Smart Object. Now, I have gone ahead and created a new file that I'm going to composite this design in, and if I go to Image, Image Size, you will see here that it is, in fact, 6 by 8 inches at 75 dpi. That is my final composite size there. Now, what I'm going to be doing with these files is I'm going to use this as a background graphic, and I'm going to place this video file inside of an iPod. So I'm kind of put together an iPod ad in a sense. Now, I looked high and low for a picture of an iPod that I could use, and I could not find one, so I just drew one up myself. So here is my iPod that I illustrated, and I'm going to use this to composite the rest of my image. Well, I'm going to start with that background file. I'm just going to drag and drop that into my document here. Now, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to bring up my free transform by pressing Command or Control T. And I'm just going to grab these corners, not holding down any Shift key or anything like that. I'm just going to push these dimensions into the corners right here. I'm going to leave this bottom area right about where it is right there. I'll just press Enter. Now, because it's a smart object and a video layer, I can apply a layer mask. So I'm just going to create a layer mask on there right there. Go and get my gradient tool, making sure we're going from black to transparent. I'm going to start right here in the bottom middle, hold down my Shift key, and just go up just about halfway of the graphic. And that will mask out that bottom area. Now, I can, of course, test my motion just to make sure everything's looking good by grabbing that playhead and pushing through just like this. Depending on your file size, it may take a minute to render, but you can see I do have some movement there. So that looks pretty good. All right, let's move on. Let's go and get that iPod image here. And I'm just going to hold down my Shift key and drag and drop that layer into my working document here. Now, of course, I built that illustration at a pretty high resolution, so I'm going to have to scale it down. So I'm going to zoom out, press Command or Control T. I'm going to hold down my Shift or Option key, or Shift and Option, sorry, or the Shift Alt key to scale that to the center, right about like that. Position that up a little bit, and we'll press Enter. Now, because it's a smart object, I'm not losing any quality. So what I want to do now is create a reflection of that object. So I'm simply going to duplicate that object, go under Edit, Transform, Flip Vertical, and we'll just drag this down. And as I did before, I'm going to apply a layer mask to this layer. Using that gradient tool, we're just going to drag in from the bottom here, mask that area out, and that gives us a nice little reflection there. Let's drop that opacity down to about 60. And that looks pretty good. Well, now I got to drop that video clip inside this window. Well, I'm going to do that inside the original Smart Object file. So, going back to that original layer, which is this one right here, I'm going to double click that Smart Object icon. And that will open up my original layered illustration here. You can see that there's many layers. This top layer here is, of course, that window. If I select that layer and move it around, there we have our little window. I'm going to take that video clip from Photoshop TV here I'm just going to drag and drop that into this file. And we'll just kind of put it in position right above that layer. And just to clip it inside there, I'm just going to activate it as a clipping group by holding down my Option or Alt key and then clicking right in between those layers. And that will mask it inside there very nicely. So once that's done, I'll just hit OK, or just close the document and save it. And we'll just move this clip out of the way. There you can see that it is updated inside of my composite. And the last thing I need to do is I've got a logo right here. There's our Nap TV logo right there. So with that in place and everything's all set, all I got to do now is render out the video. Now, I could go out here and get my playhead and just make sure everything's in play. If I toggle through, you can see I'm getting movement there. So once everything's all in place, just go under the File menu, go to Export Render Video. Now, of course, I'm not going to render this for the sake of time, but just so you know, when my document was built at 450 by 600 pixels, so inside the QuickTime Export here, I'm just going to click on Settings, and we want to make sure that we go to the size and make sure that we are set to our specific document settings, which is, of course, 450 by 600. Also have to make sure, get out of that the size here indicates 450 by 600, or you're going to find that your video is going to render out in a very distorted way. Which just may take some, one or two tries just to make sure that you're getting what you need. And of course, you just give it a file name, call it Nap TV, and then you would just click render. Now I'm not going to do that, like I said, for the sake of time, but I have gone ahead and rendered this movie out already. And if I open this file up, there you can see, let me go back to the beginning. There you can see we're getting full motion in that background. It's playing inside that iPod, all done right inside Photoshop CS3 Extended. I didn't do anything else in any other program. Normally you'd have to probably go into a program like After Effects to achieve a lot of this, but now with CS3 Extended you can achieve a lot of interesting effects right inside Photoshop